What if everything you were ever taught about God is wrong? Not a little wrong, completely, fundamentally wrong. What if God doesn't have a throne, doesn't answer prayers, doesn't reward the good or punish the wicked? What if the version of God sold to you by churches, synagogues, and mosques was never about truth? It was about control. There was one man who figured this out in the 1600s, surrounded by inquisitors and book burners. They excommunicated him, tried to kill him, and banned his books across Europe. And centuries later, Albert Einstein said that man's God is the only one worth believing in. Stay with me. This changes everything. Baruch Spinoza was born in 1632 inches for Amsterdam. And his story doesn't start with philosophy, it starts with survival. His family were Sephardic Jews who had fled the Spanish Inquisition. These were people who watched their neighbors get burned alive for their beliefs, who packed up everything and ran to the Netherlands just to practice their faith without being murdered. Amsterdam at the time was one of the only places in Europe where you could actually think without ending up on a bonfire. Not perfect, but better than everywhere else. Spinoza grew up inside that community. Smart kid, deeply educated in Hebrew scripture. Everyone expected him to become a respected rabbi, a pillar of the community. That was the plan. But then, he started reading not just the Torah, everything. Descartes, Hobbes, the Stoics. He learned Latin, the language of European philosophy, and started asking questions that made the rabbis very, very uncomfortable. Did God actually speak through prophets? Or were those prophets just projecting their own imagination? Did miracles really happen? Or are they just natural events that got misunderstood? Is the Bible the literal word of God, or a human document written by humans full of human errors for very human political purposes? These weren't just edgy questions. For a community that had survived centuries of persecution by holding tightly together, a guy publicly dismantling the foundations of their faith was an existential threat. So the rabbis called him in. They warned him. They offered him money, an actual annual salary just to shut up, just to keep his doubts private, just to perform belief even if he didn't feel it. And Spinoza said no, because for him, intellectual integrity wasn't negotiable. Selling your silence was betraying reason itself. In 1656, at just 23 years old, they issued a cherem against him, the most severe form of excommunication in Judaism. This wasn't just, "You're out of the club." The decree literally cursed him day and night. No one could speak to him, trade with him, help him, or come within 4 feet of him. His own family walked away. His community, the only world he had ever known, erased him completely. And if that wasn't enough, someone came after him with a knife. A religious fanatic tried to silence him permanently. Spinoza survived. He kept the stabbed coat, not as a trophy, as a reminder of what ideas cost when they threaten power. So what did he do after all of that? He moved to a small room outside Amsterdam, started grinding lenses for telescopes and microscopes to pay the bills, and kept writing, quietly, systematically, building a philosophical system so airtight, so logically precise, that his enemies couldn't refute it. They could only ban it. And that system started with one question that would detonate centuries of religious certainty. What is God, really? Before we go further, real quick, I need to be upfront with you. This channel has been going through some technical issues lately, and it's made it really hard to put out videos consistently. I know that's frustrating, and honestly, it's frustrating for me too, because there's so much I want to cover. So if you're genuinely interested in going deeper on Spinoza's philosophy in the full works, the ideas we don't have time to unpack here, I've dropped a link down in the description. Everything you need is right there. Check it out when you're done watching. Now, back to the man who blew up the entire concept of God with one sentence. All right, here's where it gets explosive. Because when Spinoza asks, "What is God?" his answer is nothing like what you learned in Sunday school, or catechism, or anywhere else. And I want you to really sit with this, because it sounds simple at first, and then it hits you like a freight train. Spinoza says, God is substance. Now, before you tune out, because that sounds too abstract, let me break down exactly what he means, because this is the foundation of everything. In philosophy, a substance is something that exists entirely on its own. It doesn't depend on anything else to exist. Think about everything around you right now. A chair depends on wood. Wood depends on a tree. A tree depends on soil, water, sunlight. Everything you can name is dependent on something else. It's an infinite chain of dependencies. But that chain has to start somewhere, right? There has to be something at the base that just exists self-caused, self-sustaining, eternal, unlimited. And for Spinoza, that thing is God. So far, traditional theologians are nodding along. Sure, God is the first cause, the uncaused cause. We've heard that before. But here's where Spinoza detonates the whole thing. He says there are not two things, God on one side, creation on the other. There is no separation. There is only one substance, one single, infinite reality. And that reality is both God and nature simultaneously. He wrote it in Latin, Deus sive natura, God or nature. Not God and nature. Not God created nature. God is nature. Every atom, every star, every thought, every emotion, every law of physics, that's not something God made. That is God, expressing itself. Think about what that means visually. Every religion you've ever encountered gives you the same basic picture. God is up there, creation is down here, and there's a gap between them. God is the architect, the universe is the building. The carpenter is not the table, they are separate. Spinoza looks at that picture and says, no, there is no up there is no gap. God is not outside the universe looking in. God is the universe, from the inside out. His metaphor is an ocean. Traditional religion tells you God is standing above the ocean, controlling it. Spinoza says God is the ocean, and you? You are a wave. You are not separate from the ocean. You never were. You are the ocean, expressing itself in the shape of a wave. Now, feel the weight of what that destroys in a single move. If God is nature, and nature operates by fixed laws, then miracles are impossible. A miracle would mean God suspending his own laws, contradicting his own nature. That's incoherent. If God is nature, there is no divine providence, no cosmic plan designed specifically for your life. No reason things happen for a reason. There are causes and effects, laws and necessity, nothing more. If God is nature, and everything that exists is an expression of God, then sin, in the traditional sense of defying God, makes no sense. You cannot act against God if God is everything. Everything that happens is God happening. And if there's no sin, no miracles, no divine plan, then you don't need priests to forgive your sins. You don't need rabbis to interpret God's will. You don't need rituals to purify yourself. You don't need temples. You don't need any of it. The entire infrastructure of institutional religion, its authority, its power, its revenue, collapses the moment people truly understand this idea. And that is exactly why they banned it. Spinoza didn't attack religion with insults or mockery. He didn't write angry pamphlets. He built a philosophical system as tight and rigorous as a geometric proof definitions, axioms, propositions, demonstrations, and used pure logic to show that everything the institutions were selling was built on a foundation that simply didn't hold. You can argue with emotion. You can't argue with logic. So they did the only thing they could. They burned the books and hoped the ideas would die with them. They didn't. Now here's the question you're already asking, because it's the obvious one. If everything is God, if every single thing that exists is an expression of this one infinite substance, then evil is God too, right? Disease is God. Genocide is God. The worst things humanity has ever done or suffered, all of it is God. That's the corner Spinoza gets pushed into, and it's a fair challenge. So let's look at exactly how he answers it, because the answer is just as radical as everything else. Spinoza says yes, but not in the way you think. Because here's his move. Good and evil are not objective properties of the universe. They are not things floating out in the cosmos, stamped onto events from the outside. They are human judgments. They are projections. When you say something is evil, what you are actually saying is this event conflicts with my interests, my survival, my well-being. You are not describing a feature of reality. You are describing your relationship to that event. An earthquake is not evil in any absolute sense. An earthquake is tectonic plates moving according to physical laws that have operated for billions of years. It is nature being exactly what it is. It becomes bad from your perspective because you happen to live in its path, and it destroys what you love. The universe doesn't judge. The universe doesn't prefer. The universe simply is, and inside that universe, some events help you, and some events harm you. That's the whole story. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Does that mean nothing matters? Does that mean we can just shrug at suffering and call it natural? No, Spinoza is not saying suffering isn't real. He's not telling you to be indifferent to pain. What he's dismantling is the idea that suffering has cosmic moral weight, that it's a punishment from God, or evidence of sin, or part of some divine plan you're supposed to accept on faith. Suffering is real. It just isn't a verdict. And this connects directly to one of Spinoza's most controversial claims: hard determinism. Nothing that has ever happened could have happened any other way. Everything follows from the nature of God, which is nature with absolute necessity. Every event, every decision, every thought you've ever had is the result of an infinite chain of prior causes stretching back before you were born. You didn't choose your brain. You didn't choose your family, your culture, your early experiences. You didn't choose the fears and desires that drive you. They were already in motion before you arrived. You are not a free agent standing outside the universe, making uncaused choices. You are part of the universe, and your choices are part of its unfolding. Here's why Spinoza thinks that's actually liberating rather than crushing. If everything is determined, if you could not have been other than what you are, and given all the causes that shaped you, then guilt in the traditional sense becomes irrational. Not useful guilt that motivates change. The kind of guilt that eats you alive, that tells you you are fundamentally broken, that you deserve punishment for being exactly what your history made you. Spinoza cuts that off at the root. And in its place, he puts something far more powerful: understanding. If you want to change, you don't need to hate yourself into it. You need to understand the causes that produce the behavior you want to change. Knowledge, not shame. Comprehension, not punishment. That shift alone is worth the price of the whole philosophy. And this is precisely why institutional religion cannot afford to teach this, because guilt is the product. Guilt is what fills the pews, what drives the donations, what keeps people coming back for absolution. A person who understands their own nature without shame, who approaches their flaws with curiosity instead of self-hatred, that person doesn't need saving. And a person who doesn't need saving is a person you cannot control. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough when people discuss Spinoza, but it might be the most personally relevant idea in his entire philosophy. And it directly attacks one of the deepest wounds that religion has inflicted on human beings for centuries. For most of Western history, you were taught that you are two things: a body and a soul, matter and spirit, the physical and the divine. And the relationship between those two things was never equal. The soul was pure, elevated, eternal, godlike. The body was dirty, weak, sinful, temporary. Plato said it. The Church hammered it in for 1,000 years. Descartes gave it a formal philosophical framework, res extensa, the material world, and res cogitans, the thinking mind, two completely separate substances somehow crammed together inside a human being. The result of all this? Centuries of people being taught to punish their own bodies. Extreme fasting, physical mortification, sexual repression, shame around pleasure, contempt for physical existence. Because if the body is the enemy of the soul, then suffering in the flesh becomes a spiritual virtue. Spinoza looks at all of that and says, this is not just wrong, it's the opposite of the truth. In his system, body and mind are not two separate substances. They are the same single thing, seen from two different angles. Remember, there is only one substance, and that substance has infinite attributes. Humans perceive two of them: extension, which is the physical world, matter, space, your body, and thought, which is mind, ideas, consciousness. Your body is a mode of extension. Your mind is a mode of thought, but they are not two things interacting. They are one thing described two ways, like a triangle. You can describe it geometrically, three sides, three angles, or algebraically as an equation. Two completely different descriptions. Same triangle, that's you, one being, one expression of the infinite substance, perceived from two perspectives simultaneously. What does that mean practically? It means there is no hierarchy. Your body is not inferior to your mind. Your mind is not trapped inside your body like a prisoner waiting for death to set it free. They move together perfectly because they are the same thing. When your mind is under stress, your body feels it. When your body is sick, your mind feels it. There is no separation, there never was. And that destroys the entire religious argument for bodily punishment. If body and mind are one, then punishing your body is punishing yourself. Repressing your natural desires is not purifying your soul, it's suppressing your own nature. Denying yourself physical existence is not getting closer to God. It's getting further from what you actually are. And what you actually are, according to Spinoza, is already complete, already whole, already an expression of the infinite. The religious model needs you to feel broken, contaminated by original sin, polluted by physical desire, fundamentally inadequate without divine intervention. Spinoza flips that entirely. You are not broken. You are exactly what the causes that produced you made you. And understanding that really understanding it is the beginning of actual freedom. Not the kind promised after death, but the kind available right now, in this body, in this life. So, if everything is determined, if your choices are the product of causes you didn't choose, if free will in the traditional sense doesn't exist, then what does freedom even mean? Because this is where a lot of people hit a wall with Spinoza. It sounds like he's saying you're just a robot executing a program written before you were born. And if that's true, why does anything matter? Why try? Why think? Why change anything at all? Here's where Spinoza's genius really shows up. He redefines freedom completely, and the redefinition is so clean, so precise, that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Freedom, for Spinoza, is not the absence of causes. Nothing exists without causes. That's the whole point. Freedom is understanding the causes that drive you. That's it. That's the entire shift. The difference between a free person and an unfree person is not that one has causes and the other doesn't. It's that one understands their causes and the other is blindly pushed around by them. Think about two people. The first person has a deep fear, maybe of failure, maybe of abandonment, and every decision they make is quietly shaped by that fear. They avoid risks, they stay in bad situations, they make choices that don't serve them, and they have no idea why. They are being determined by a cause they cannot see. The second person has the same fear, but they've done the work to understand it. They know where it came from, how it operates, what triggers it. They can't make the fear disappear. It was built into them by real experiences, but they can respond to it from a place of awareness rather than just react from a place of panic. Both people are determined. But the second person is freer because they are acting from understanding rather than from blind compulsion. That is Spinoza's freedom, not magic. Not a soul floating above causality, clarity, comprehension. Reason applied to your own inner mechanics. And this connects directly to what Spinoza calls conatus, one of the most powerful concepts in his entire philosophy. Every single thing that exists has a fundamental drive to persist, to continue existing, to express its own nature as fully as possible. A plant grows toward light because that is its conatus. An animal hunts because that is its conatus. You seek pleasure, avoid pain, protect the people you love, build things, create things, fight for your survival, because that is your conatus. It is not a moral choice. It is your nature, your essence, the expression of the infinite substance flowing through the particular form that is you. And here is where Spinoza builds his ethics from the ground up, without a single commandment, without a single threat of hell or promise of heaven. If your essence is your conatus, your drive to exist and flourish, then the ethical question becomes simple. What increases your power to act, to think, to live fully? That is good. What diminishes it? That is bad. Not good and bad handed down from a throne. Good and bad as a rational evaluation of what actually serves your nature. Hatred feels powerful, but it consumes you, makes you reactive, chains you to whoever you hate. It diminishes your power. Rational love, love based on understanding, not fantasy, expands you, connects you, increases your capacity to act. Revenge keeps you locked in the past, burning energy on something that's already over. Understanding and moving forward frees that energy for the present. Every single ethical choice Spinoza makes runs through this one filter. Does this increase or decrease the power of a human being to live as fully as what they are? And notice what's completely absent from that framework. There is no obedience, there is no submission to authority, there is no fear of punishment driving you toward good behavior. The ethics emerges naturally from understanding your own nature and the nature of the world you live in. You don't need to be threatened into acting well. You need to be shown clearly that acting well is what actually serves you, and that acting destructively is what actually destroys you, regardless of whether anyone is watching. That is the philosophy that no institution can afford to teach, because an institution that rules through fear becomes completely unnecessary the moment its people understand that fear was never the point. In 1929, a rabbi sent Albert Einstein a telegram. Simple question: do you believe in God? Einstein's answer became one of the most quoted statements in the history of science and philosophy. He said, "I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the lawful harmony of all that exists, not in a God who concerns himself with the fate and the doings of mankind." Think about what that means coming from Einstein. This is the man who spent his entire life trying to understand the deepest structure of reality, who described the universe in equations of breathtaking elegance, who looked at the cosmos and saw not chaos but order patterns so precise, so consistent, so mathematically beautiful that they felt like something more than accident. And when he tried to name what that something was, he didn't reach for the God of churches or synagogues. He reached for the God of a 17th century lens grinder who died, broke, and alone, and excommunicated. Why? Because Spinoza's God is the only version of God that doesn't require you to suspend your intelligence to believe in it. Every other version of God at some point asks you to accept something that contradicts what science actually shows us about how reality works. Miracles that break natural laws, divine interventions that override cause and effect. A personal deity who manages 7 billion individual human lives simultaneously, while also running a universe of 2 trillion galaxies. Spinoza's God asks none of that. Spinoza's God doesn't interrupt the laws of nature. Spinoza's God is the laws of nature. The order, the elegance, the mathematical precision that Einstein spent his life uncovering, that is the divine. expressed in the only language that doesn't lie, physics. And the influence didn't stop with Einstein. The Romantic movement in Germany, Goethe, Schiller, the whole tradition was saturated with Spinoza. The modern environmental movement, deep ecology, the idea that nature is not a resource to be exploited, but a living whole, deserving reverence, that's Spinoza. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio wrote an entire book called Looking for Spinoza, arguing that modern brain science is essentially confirming what Spinoza figured out through pure reason 300 years ago, that body and mind are not separate systems, that emotion and reason are not opposites, that understanding your own internal states is the foundation of a functioning life. A man who ground lenses for a living, working alone in a rented room, figured out things that took humanity 3 more centuries of scientific development to independently verify. Here's the thing that nobody wants to say out loud, but Spinoza said it anyway, 350 years ago, and it is just as true right now in 2024 as it was then. Every institution that depends on your obedience needs one thing above everything else. It needs you to feel like you are not enough on your own. It needs the gap between you and God, between you and salvation, between you and whatever version of wholeness they're selling. Because the moment that gap closes, the moment you genuinely understand that you are already part of the whole, already connected, already complete, you stop needing them. And an institution that nobody needs is an institution that has no power. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is just an honest look at the incentive structure. When your revenue model depends on people feeling sinful, when your authority depends on being the exclusive bridge between humanity and the divine, when your entire organizational structure is built on the premise that people cannot access truth without you, then a philosopher who says, "You already have direct access to everything, you just need to understand it," is not just a theological inconvenience, he is an existential threat, which is why they didn't just disagree with Spinoza. They excommunicated him, tried to kill him, banned his books across multiple countries, and called his work forged in hell. You don't bring that kind of firepower against an idea that doesn't scare you. And the idea still scares them, because the core of what Spinoza is saying has never stopped being true, and has never stopped being dangerous to anyone who profits from keeping you small. You are not broken. You do not need saving. You are not separate from the divine. You never were. The universe is not indifferent to you. You are the universe, experiencing itself from one particular angle for one particular window of time. And the path forward is not faith in someone else's authority. It is knowledge, your own hard-won rational understanding of how reality actually works. You can burn books. History proved that doesn't work. You can excommunicate people. Spinoza kept writing. You can ban ideas from entire countries. The ideas spread anyway. Because once a human mind genuinely grasps that it doesn't need an intermediary to connect with what is real and true and fundamental, that realization cannot be taken back. It cannot be unlearned. It can only be passed forward. Spinoza passed it to Leibniz, to Goethe, to the Romantics, to Nietzsche, to Einstein, to Damasio, and now it's sitting here in front of you. What you do with it is entirely up to you. Not because you have some mystical free will floating above causality, but because understanding is itself a cause, and causes have effects. And the effect of genuine understanding, Spinoza spent his entire life arguing, is always, always freedom. And hey, one more thing before you go. As I mentioned earlier, the channel has been dealing with some ongoing technical issues that have slowed things down on my end. I genuinely wish I could drop new videos every week, but right now, that's not where we're at. What I can tell you is if this video sparked something in you, if you want to keep going with Spinoza, with the ethics, with the ideas, we only scratched the surface of today, the link is in the description. It's the best way to stay connected while we work through everything on the back end. Subscribe, hit the link, and I'll see you in the next one, whenever that is.